Okay, I just figured I'd make a little video here on this Losi Mini-B. My son has a Mini-B. I bought him that car I think about 2 years ago. And they have a class at his summer camp where he can race it and upgrade it. And so this past summer, um, he they gave him parts to upgrade it with a brushless motor and a bunch of other like aftermarket parts. And then he wanted me to try it out at RCHR on the turf track. And I tried it out and actually drove really great. These things are even more fun to drive with the brushless motor, which is what his car has. The brush motor is great, it's fun, but doesn't quite give you enough to go over like 1/10 scale size doubles. So with the brushless motor in there, even with it turned down, it's plenty quick. So I figured I'd want to get one myself so that we can maybe take it and go racing together with it. So this is the Mini-B Pro, which comes with aluminum shocks and a clear body, so I could paint it the way I like, with my own paint scheme. And then I just put in, and let me just, hopefully I can do this with one hand. We'll see. All right, hold on. Let me just put this phone down for a minute here. There we go. Okay. So it doesn't come with any electronics. You have to do that all yourself. So this has the EcoPower servo. It's the 827 servo. Seems to do the job just fine. The Mini-B Pro comes with a servo horn, and the servo itself also comes with a servo horn. So you don't need to buy an extra servo horn. You actually get a spare one, essentially. And then in here you have this Hobbywing 18 amp brushless system. This is, I think, the 9000 kV sensorless setup. The motor's pretty tiny, but this thing rips. And the way the speed control is shaped, there is room to put it in there. But as far as the receiver goes, like the Spectrum receivers that I use with my Sanwa Hexes radio over there, those are too big and too fat to actually fit in here. So I have to actually use my Futaba 3UCP with these Corona receivers, which are slimmer. And I just mount it vertically, and that fits just fine. Battery goes here, and then I'm going to put a transponder right here. Okay, so it should be enough space for that. As far as like aftermarket parts go, I did a few things, and I have a few things on order. So one thing I purchased are the RC all-wheel drive CVDs, and those are nice because they come fully assembled. All I did was I just put a little bit of grease in the CVD joint and tightened down the grub screw just to make sure that it's tight. And it comes with even some spare parts. You get some spare, I don't know what exactly the name is for this piece, but this is part of the CVD joint here. You get some spare grub screws and drive pins. So it's nice that it comes with extras there. And it also comes with an aluminum wheel hex. It just slots right on. So that's pretty nice of them to include those in there. And it's, I would say, better value than the MIP CVDs, which are a bit more expensive. Although, I do like MIP products, but they do have to compete in an open market with other folks. And so these appear to be slightly better value for what you get. But I did put in an MIP ball diff in this. That is another upgrade. That goes together kind of interestingly. It doesn't have a conventional thrust bearing setup where you have a thrust bolt on one side and a bearing with a bearing on it. And then the spring, I think, would be on the other side. You actually have these sort of spring washers on both sides of the diff that the diff outdrives kind of mate to, and that whole thing tightens together as you tighten down the thrust bolt. So the assembly is a little different and a little finicky. The other thing is the balls for the thrust bearing are very tiny, and they're easy to lose. I was a little surprised, actually, that the thrust bearing wouldn't have slightly larger sized thrust balls, because even with the size they are, there's still plenty of space to fit more of them around the thrust bolt. When you build a thrust bearing, you have like the inner plate, and then you put some grease down, you put the thrust balls on, you put the other plate on. And as you're putting those thrust balls around on the plate, usually in like an RC10 or some other car, you can fit maybe 8 thrust ball or balls around that plate. Here you get, I think you get about 8 of those balls, but they're smaller. because the thrust bolt is smaller. But they don't really scale in the right way. You could probably fit maybe like 10 of those around to build a thrust bearing instead of what they give you. So hopefully that lasts. I don't know how this is going to hold up to the brushless power, although this does have a slipper clutch. So, you know, maybe that'll help. I got so much stuff here. I'm making such a mess. All right. That's one thing. The other thing is for the gear cover, this comes as fully closed. So I opened this up. I just took like a reamer and opened this out. So that way I can adjust the slipper clutch from the outside. Otherwise, you have to undo 2 screws and take this whole thing off to make a slipper clutch adjustment, which isn't really practical. So just make sure you open that up. And then other changes I've made, I did buy a spring set, although I haven't quite gotten to using that yet. And I also bought the front and rear sway bar sets. Thing about that is for the front sway bar, these don't come with instructions. So you got to look the instructions up online. And the only ones I were able to really find were YouTube videos, not like an actual PDF file. Now, in that YouTube video, made by TLR themselves, they claim that the stock part for this ball stud mount here has a notch in it for you to mount this sway bar up against, and then you put 2 little screws on with washers to hold it in place. I don't see that notch anywhere. The only thing I see is like a little sort of clip here behind the front bumper for this to go to slot in. But that's not going to hold down, and it's certainly not going to hold down in such a way to actually stabilize the sway bar so that you can, you know, when you lift this arm, that this starts to pick up a little bit. So as far as I can tell, you have to buy an aluminum aftermarket ball stud mount here that has that little notch on it. So I'm waiting for that to come in the mail so I can mount that. And then going to the rear, they also don't include for the rear really the parts you need for full assembly. You get the sway bar, you get the tie rods, well, not even tie rods, but they're sort of fixed length tie rods. But what you don't get is the mounting piece that would cover the sway bar on the back side here. So the sway bar goes across this little notch and then over to the front of the rear arms. Then you need a cover here to hold the sway bar down. This doesn't even come with like 2 little screws and little washers you could use to screw them in and use the washers to hold the sway bar down. So you got to either buy a mount, which I did, and I'm waiting for that to come in as well, or just find 2 screws with washers and slot them in. So yeah, that's kind of it. And then I put a little fan here. When I did a test run on my son's version of this the other day outside, and this motor gets pretty hot, and it's not helped by the fact that there's no heat sink on this, and the body is a closed body, so you're not really getting airflow to the motor. So you just get like a small ESC fan, because this is a Mini-B, it's not a 1/10 scale buggy, so you're going to have a hard time fitting a 30 by 30 fan on here. Just get a small ESC fan, just tape it in there, and that should do the trick. And yeah, it looks like it'll be a lot of fun. I look forward to racing this, and we'll see how it goes. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.